The Capitol Police Force has been completely revamped with new leadership since last January 6th, along with communication among other law enforcement agencies who missed key warnings last year, but is more needed. This morning, the new Capitol Police Chief, Thomas Manger, addressing the improvements made so far.
The events of January 6th did expose critical departmental failures and deficiencies with operational planning, intelligence, staffing, training, and equipment. I'm pleased to report that we have addressed a significant portion of the many recommendations issued to the department. In fact, of the more than 100 recommendations issued by the Inspector General, we have implemented and are addressing over 90 of them.
Chief Manger addressing the Senate Rules Committee. Joining me now, Jeh Johnson, President Obama's former Secretary of Homeland Security, of course, who warned a year ago that the electoral count ceremony should have been declared a major national security event in the first place, which would have increased the security many-fold. Secretary, thank you very much. As a former Homeland Security Secretary, how did January 6th reframe your understanding of our basic security here in the Capitol?
Andrea, let me start with this. My great-great-grandmother's brother fled slavery in Southwest Virginia, headed north, and joined an infantry unit of the Union Army to fight the South, to win the freedom of his family during the Civil War. Not during the Civil War did we see what we saw a year ago, an insurrection on the U.S. Capitol, a Confederate flag being paraded through the U.S. Capitol. The events of January 6, 2021 should never be normalized in our memory, in our thinking. This was a once in a lifetime of a nation event, hopefully. Let's hope it never happens again. Now, in terms of the Capitol Police, in terms of the security for such events, I'm afraid we see this far too often with our federal government. Our government is caught surprised, it is caught flat-footed, and it is now overcompensating to correct what happened and to prepare for another similar event like this. I used to tell people at the Department of Homeland Security when I was secretary, we have to prepare for the next attack, not the last attack. I think the Capitol Police are doing the right thing in moving in the right direction to make sure that there is adequate security for events like this in the future, whether it's a State of the Union, whether it's another January 6th. But I'm afraid that what we saw on January 6th a year ago was the tip of an iceberg. This type of extremist thinking and behavior could manifest itself again at other similar events. And so we've got to keep our eye on all of it, Andrea.
And in fact, Secretary Johnson, it's a failure of imagination, isn't it? And is it now a threat that we're seeing in school boards and in election officials who are being protested against? You know, is it now spreading in so many different ways at the local level? That's part of the reporting that our own Brandy Zavadny had on this program yesterday.
I think the simple answer is yes. There have been studies done of the demographics of the insurrectionist, and there have been studies done of the current thinking among Americans. Not surprisingly, many of those who stormed the Capitol a year ago were motivated by the so-called Great Replacement, that people of color are somehow replacing white America, and they don't like that. They fear that somehow. And as you know, Andrea, there have been polls out just recently that some 30 to 34% of Americans would be prepared to resort to violence to do what they believe is necessary to somehow save our country. And so I worry that extremist behavior, extremist thinking is becoming mainstream thinking in our society. And January 6th was one manifestation of that, but that type of thinking, that strand of America has not gone away. It still exists.
You know, I was just going to ask you about that poll. That was the Washington Post poll. We threw the numbers up there because that's extraordinary for a third of the people to be even thinking that violence is justified against the country.
Well, it very often depends on how you ask the question.
Sure.
I've seen polls done earlier that suggest that 30% of Republicans would be prepared to resort to violence. over an election, for example. I'm paraphrasing, I'm not getting the words exactly right. But whether it's 34% of Americans or 30% of Republicans or some other double-digit percentage, that's millions and millions of Americans who somehow feel that their government does not work for them, and they're prepared to, just like the images we see now, take matters into their own hands. And, you know, when I was secretary, lots of people used to ask me, what keeps you up at night? This keeps me up at night. I'm afraid that January 6th was not the last such event that we may see.
And how concerned are you about the online connections? Because the other piece is that since a year ago, you know, they have gone offline into secure places where they can communicate, Telegram and others, things that are encrypted and which are less obvious.
Social media is a large part of this. The thinking behind storming the U.S. Capitol, engaging in an insurrection, is something you don't get on USA Today. It's not new. It comes from social media. It comes from people crawling down these extremist rabbit holes, embracing conspiracy theories. I saw a poll not too long ago that 1 in 6 Americans, something like 15% of America, ascribes to the QAnon theory that our government, our media, our financial services sector is controlled by Satan-worshiping pedophiles. That's 1 in 6 Americans who've lost a grip on reality. And you don't get that from USA Today. And so social media has a lot to do with what we see right now.
And, you know, how vulnerable are we with social media that adversaries, foreign adversaries, certainly the Russians, can exploit these tensions in American society?
Of the Russian interference in the 2016 election, the most prevalent form of that interference was on social media, cultivating the thought that Trump was better than Clinton, putting their thumb on the scale through social media. You know, in many respects, as a free society, our greatest strength, free speech, is also our greatest vulnerability. And so I believe that social media has a lot to do with where we are now politically in terms of our thinking. And it's in many respects like chasing shadows. The larger platforms can adopt guidelines. They can take people off their platforms, but they can just simply resort to another platform someplace else that doesn't have the same guidelines.
Former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeh Johnson, it's very good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Nice to see you, Andrea. Happy New Year.
The same to you.